Okay, today we're going to be talking about differentiating instruction. So, what is differentiated instruction? This is an approach where teachers can change what they're doing with their instruction in order to meet all the needs of all learners. You have your average learners, English language learners, the struggling students, students with learning disabilities, and then there's the gifted and talented students. So there's three main things that teachers can adjust with their instructional elements, and that's content, process, and product. So first with content, the same concept or skill is going to be taught to each student, but the curriculum is going to be changed a little bit in how the student learns the information. So it might be different for each student. Then there's the process. So differentiating the process is, again, you're teaching the same concept or skill to each student, but it's just the way in which you deliver that information that makes sense to the student. It can vary. Teachers should be doing this by varying their activities. They can assess students' readiness levels, their interests, their learning profiles. You can break students up into groups. You have small groups. You have, pairs. You can have larger groups. You can work individually. There's just many different ways that you can go about doing that, and that is the process. Then you have the product. So the product is, again, where you're assessing the same concept or skill for each student, but we're offering students different ways to show their knowledge. It's just shows how they can, how they have learned and how they can move forward with this concept or skill. Some ways that they can do that is a video. They can do a written report, a test, or even a verbal assessment rather than writing. Teachers should include many options as far as the differentiating things. They have visual options, auditory options, kinesthetic options, which is like hands-on, analytical options, creative options, and practical options. You should always allow a student to choose the option that they wish. They can do it alone or as a group, but they also need to know that they can't always do the same thing over and over again. They need to vary their options a little bit. So when you're evaluating performance, it's a little tricky because each student's going to be doing something different. But you can do things like rubrics, portfolios, or even self-assessments. So rubrics are going to give you the basics of what is required for the activity or the presentation or whatever it may be, and you get a certain score if you have all these things included in it. So to me, that would be an easy way to evaluate, is you're like, these are the requirements, however you give me those, and that information is up to you, but it has to have all this information, whether it's in a test, in a visual thing, different things like that. Then there's assigning grades. So you want to assign grades based on like achievement, growth, and different habits. So how is the student performing? Are they improving over time based on what they achieved in the past versus now after the lesson has taken place? Are they participating? Is their behavior acceptable? Are they giving all their effort? And are they in attendance to all of the things that they need to be in attendance to? So, preparing students in classrooms for differentiated instructions. So the first thing you need to do is you need to communicate. You need to communicate with the students, let them know what's going on, what your expectations are, and then you need to communicate with the parents. Let them know what your expectations are for the classroom and what they will be seeing from their student, their child, as time goes on. You also need to have a very organized classroom. If your classroom is disorganized, it is just chaotic. Organization is key. And you should employ effective behavior management. So you need to have these expectations as far as behavior goes. If students don't know what you require when it comes to behavior, inappropriate or appropriate behavior, then they're going to push the boundaries. They're going to push those limits and they're going to do whatever they want. And if you don't stand your ground and be strong in what your requirements are, then it's going to be a chaotic, disorganized classroom. Okay, so what does differentiated instruction look like? So first of all, your teachers, the process is very slow. It shouldn't all be done at once. It can take like 4 to 5 years. You do small and manageable things within that very first year. And then you just gradually, over the next few years, you're going to incorporate that differentiated instruction. And, within 5 years, you should be fully ready in your classroom to provide adequate differentiated instruction. So to get started, you want to select one element, whether it's content, process, product, or your learning environment. You're going to select that element. Then you're going to start with a subject area, math, science, reading, whatever it may be. And then you're going to start with the group of students that you have that's the easiest to work with. You don't want to work with the kids that already struggle as it is and then bring this change to their environment. It's very difficult to practice something on students that already struggle as it is. Then you're going to implement a differentiated activity in a larger lesson or unit, but only do one of them. Don't do everything differentiated in the activity. You just want to do one differentiated activity in a larger lesson or unit. And then you begin working with the students in their small groups. You break down the large group and you start with the small groups and you kind of get an idea of what's working and what's not. Then you're going to assign homework for different groups of students, whether based on whether they're ready, if they're interested, their preferred way of demonstrating their knowledge. Those are just a few things. You're going to provide the support for the readers that struggle, students with learning disabilities, the English language learners. Then you're going to implement low prep activities rather than the high prep activities. Something that does not take a lot of time to get ready for, and students can, get right into it. And you're going to use a simple means of gathering information about students. So you're either going to do a test that you would normally give at the end of a chapter. You're going to do it at the beginning to see what students know and what they don't know. You're going to do exit cards, which are like cards asking questions like, how much do you understand this? Like, totally understand, kind of understand, not at all. And then you have other, interest surveys that students can take that just kind of give you an idea of what they're interested in and what they're not. So some common classroom practices that are going on right now include lecturing, grouping students together at the beginning of the year based on previous year's achievements test scores, and giving bonus points for classroom participation. So, for lecturing, it's not considered a type of differentiated instruction. This is because it's a form of auditory teaching. Not all students are auditory learners, and using one form or style of teaching does not reach the needs of all the students. Some students may be visual learners, hands-on learners, analytical learners, creative learners, practical learners, all sorts of different learners. So when you're just lecturing to a group of students that need visuals or that need hands-on or whatever, they're not going to gain that knowledge that you're trying to get them to gain. Ways to adjust this: you could add some colorful or vibrant detailed visuals or videos that go along with your lecture. You could add some props, maybe some artifacts that you have that go along with the lesson, and you can pass them around so the students can see what you're talking about and they can listen and watch at the same time. And you could maybe add in an activity for students, something that relates to your lecture and your lesson, and something that could be kind of hands-on that a student could do to really grasp the concept that you're trying to get across. Next, we have the grouping of students. Grouping students at the beginning of the year based on their previous year's achievement is not considered differentiated instruction. This is because it's not an accurate evaluation for determining a student's current abilities and knowledge of content. A student may have progressed or even digressed since that assessment has taken place from last year. And some students have different learning styles that are not necessarily an option to use on the original assessment that they had taken. So, ways to adjust this: you can provide some pre-tests at the beginning of the school year to see where the students are when it comes to the content and the knowledge that they have. You can provide some activities and assessments that require different learning styles, like visual learning styles, hands-on, auditory, different things like that, and you can really figure out where a student may be at. And you can work with students as a large group or in small groups or even individually to figure out how they may be grouped or not grouped. You might be able to figure out as a large group that, these kids go here, these kids go here. You might have a better chance of doing it when you're in smaller groups and say, oh, this group needs to be split up into 2 different groups or whatever it may be. And then sometimes it's just based individually. So, bonus points. Giving bonus points for classroom participation is not considered a type of differentiated instruction either. So, why would that be? It doesn't indicate that a student does not know the required content. It doesn't delineate whether a student knows or does not know the content intended for the lesson. And some students are just not participatory students. They might be introverts. They listen and gain the information needed, and they don't really like to talk. They don't participate. Ways to adjust this would be to give bonus points based on knowledge, what they actually learned rather than their participation. Just don't give bonus points at all. It just might not even be necessary. Or you can judge the student participation based on how they are contributing to their group or their activity rather than the whole class participation. That concludes my presentation on differentiating instruction. Thank you.